Our next presenter is Courtney Blue. She is a PhD candidate in ethnomusicology at UCLA, specializing in anthropology. Her interests include memory studies, transnational networks of song, and giving voice to women's stories. Adept in multiple languages, including Hebrew, Spanish, and Arabic, she's also interested in language transmission and migration. Presently, she's researching heritage making and song transmission in North Africa and the Middle East, specializing in the North Moroccan Judeo-Spanish diaspora. Courtney is a conservatory-trained vocalist with experience performing classical jazz and folk repertoire. In addition, she plays the mandolin, is an avid yoga practitioner and teacher, and leads the Ladino choir Cantigas Nuestras in Los Angeles. The title of her presentation is Sonic Affinities and Expectations, Recollecting and Reinterpreting a North Moroccan Sephardic Woman's Audiovisual Archival Voice. So, Courtney.
Of the talk. All right. Perfect. All right, thank you so much, Munir, for the introduction. Even though I believe Huda is no longer in tune with us, I also am very grateful to her, and I believe that actually both of these talks really do go well together. There were many things that she said that in a way preface what I'm going to talk about and are in dialogue with it, so that's wonderful. And also thank you so much to everyone that organized this conference, Daniela, and the whole committee. As Munir said, my talk is called Sonic Affinities and Expectations, Recollecting and Reinterpreting a North Moroccan Sephardic Woman's Audiovisual Archival Voice. And this talk is really based on ongoing PhD research that I'm undertaking that is focused on the biography of a Moroccan Jewish woman. Hold on, let me get my, that's why. Named Alicia Benassayag de Bendayan. She is a folk singer who was born in Tétouan, northern Morocco in 1922, immigrated to Israel in 1956, and passed away in Ashkelon in 2021. So she had a very long and rich life, and she is well known for her, sorry, I have some phlegm in my throat. Thank you. She is very known and beloved by researchers, her community members, and everyone that knew her for her pleasant singing voice, and most of all, her exceptional memory, through which she housed hundreds of Judeo-Spanish folk songs, or especially Haketía folk songs, which is the dialect of Judeo-Spanish that emanated out of Morocco. And this led to a vast archive and set of scholarly studies and journal articles. I've just placed a bunch of them here as a visual representation, and this isn't even everything, but this is really a multinational set of representations of Haketía song. And Alicia Benassayag is featured very heavily in the majority of these studies as the principal, what we would traditionally call informant, but would now say collaborator, because she partnered with these researchers, shared her wisdom, her background, her knowledge of her community and the surrounding communities to inform these studies. And also I should mention that this includes Spanish scholars, Israeli scholars, American scholars, Canadian scholars, sound recordings, archives. I didn't even mention the National Library of Congress, but she's got recordings there as well. And Haketía language is really a North Moroccan phenomena. I think I should differentiate that between the broader Moroccan context that we've been discussing even in the previous presentation. Haketía language really is concentrated only in the Maghreb region. So when Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, many of them were absorbed by the Ottoman Empire, and therefore the Ladino language that coalesced there usually absorbed languages from the Balkan regions, Turkish, etc. Whereas Haketía is really this unique blend of Spanish Hebrew, and Moroccan Arabic, or Derija. And with regards to representation of sonic representations of Jewishness, which is the study or the focus of this conference, these are my main research questions, which is essentially, how does Haketía practice signify Jewish identity? How does Alicia Bendayan's oral history archive inform our understanding of North Moroccan Jewish sonic perceptions? And how did 20th century ruptures of colonialism, migration, and nationalism become entangled with Haketía representation and transmission? And in order to answer these questions, I'm going to examine both emic and etic representational frameworks. So that includes looking at the oral histories and understanding self-perception and perception of surrounding communities. And in addition, I'm also looking into national and colonial affinities and institutional agendas that shaped our understanding of the transmission of this language and repertoire. And I'm evaluating sound recordings, linguistic and song studies, as well as songbooks. Examining the material that I've looked at so far, at least for this paper, has led me to conclude that the Jewish community of Tetuan, in particular, where Alicia Bendayan was born and raised, like other North Moroccan Jewish communities, it transmitted the Haketía language to build sonic identity boundaries with their environment and to preserve their Jewish way of life. In addition, the Tetuan community developed a distinct traditional local identity grounded in sonic expressions of what they deemed was a pure Castilian Haketía language. So we're looking at a very unique case here, or I guess distinct case of self-perception and differentiating themselves from even their co-linguists, I guess maybe the word would be. So first of all, to answer the question of how is Haketía language and the sonic expression of Haketía connected to Jewish identity, which is so much connected to what this conference is about. Haketía language was a part of Jewish life in Morocco for hundreds of years, and it was a way of transmitting Jewish identity from generation to generation and to create sonic identity boundaries with surrounding communities. It was the song that was, or the language that was sung for paraliturgical rituals that occurred in the home, for life cycle events. It was also the language that was used to sing various folk songs that were sung by women in the domestic sphere. And this is a rich ballad tradition, sung by women primarily, transmitted from generation to generation. And these songs included many encoded messages and morals. Many of the plots of these, especially the romances, which are these lyrical ballads that could be connected to larger ballad traditions from other cultures, Irish tradition, French tradition, they might connect to kings and queens. That might be the main subject, or murder or adultery. They can often have quite scandalous plot lines. But at the core of these ballads is an essential message of trying to train, especially the women of their community, to be sexually pure and to ensure the survival of their community for future generations. So there were many warnings that were implicit in these ballads. I will play one of the ballads for you. This is sung by Alicia Bendayan in her home in Tetuan, carrying one of her little children in hand. And she's singing a ballad called Una hija tiene rey. And this is a romanza, right? So it's one of these lyrical ballads, but it also is used as a wedding song. So the main message of this song is focusing on the faithfulness of a woman who her beloved is gone away at war. And so for this reason, this ballad in particular remained part of the very vast wedding repertoire because it reinforced the idea of a faithful wife.
Tiene el rey una hija regalada, su padre por más valor nunca pilló la fraguara, con ventanas a la mar por donde el aire la entrara, por una le entraba el sol y el aire de la mañana, la más chiquita de ellas, entra un gavilán y sale con sus alas abiertas, no le hace ningún mal. Bordando está un camisón para el hijo de la reina, bordándole está con oro, labrándole está con seda.
All right, in the interest of time, I will stop the recording now because we have more material to cover. But you can get an impression that these are songs that are sung a cappella, usually by perhaps a soloist or a group. And they're strophic songs with a melody that repeats over and over again. So really the melodies of these songs are carriers of text, and sometimes very vast bodies of text. Long stories that someone like Alicia Benassayag, who had an exceptional memory, could remember stanza after stanza. I do also want to highlight the work of Vanessa Paloma Elbaz, who is a scholar of Haketía women's song, and the term sonic identity boundaries comes from her research. And she works with the Jewish community in Morocco present day, so that might be a good resource also to look into. So one of a quote that I wanted to highlight is that she said, "Women's sonic role in maintaining historically local lineages continues within circumscribed familial, geographic, and linguistic spaces. These bonds of sonic belonging become a form of constructing the space of Jewishness and its gradations within Moroccan society through sound, song, and context." And despite the fact that most Moroccan Jews no longer live in Morocco, there's just a small community that's left, this similar practice historically occurred in this way. In the previous talk, we talked a bit about the Melah, and the city of Tétouan also contained a Melah. So this was an enclosed Jewish quarter where the whole community lived, which led to a certain level of social isolation and sometimes difficult conditions of living. And the Melah in Tétouan was called La Judería de Tétouan, or La Pequeña Jerusalén, the Little Jerusalem. And within these isolated Melah environments, the women would oftentimes gather in courtyards. So they were even further isolated than even the men. So this would be a place where they might swing on matesha, which was oftentimes a swing that would be placed in the courtyard, and women would transmit songs and play games together. And they would sing various repertoire, including the lyrical ballads, the romances, also cantos de boda, wedding songs, endechas, which were songs of mourning that usually wouldn't be sung casually. These would be sung at various life cycle events, Tisha B'Av, which is the commemoration of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, and also cantigas, which were just light songs. And it's also important to mention that during the 20th century, and even slightly before, there was French influence in the region through the school, the Alliance Israélite Universelle. And the first school actually was established in Tétouan of all of the different Alliance projects. So even Alicia Benassayag, as a young girl, was able to have access to education, which was a relatively new phenomenon in that time for Jews in North Africa and the Middle East. And I should also mention, this is very important, that during between 1912 to 1956, Morocco was under colonial rule. And so northern Morocco, the area where most of the Haketía speakers were living, was under Spanish rule. There was a Spanish protectorate between 1912 to 1956. And Tétouan, the city, served as the capital city. And this, I believe, was in large part because Tétouan was really the first community that Jews and Muslims settled in after they were expelled from Spain in 1492. It has a certain historic Andalusian association to it, and is even considered to be quite enclosed and conservative. And I have a feeling for the Spaniards, there was a certain appeal and cultural capital associated with this city. And during this period, there was increased mainland Spanish presence and influence in the region, including soldiers and also all kinds of cafes and Spanish culture that was being introduced into the region. And so even from the Moroccan perspective, this might be a time to consider this a period of de-assimilation to North Africa and de-Arabization of these communities. So it's a community in flux, really. The Spaniards were trying to leverage the Spanish-speaking Jews to garner a sense of loyalty among colonial subjects, which led to the movement of filosefardismo or philo-Sephardism, which was spearheaded by Ángel Pulido, who was a Spanish politician, who was really trying to make amends for the 1492 expulsion and saw an opportunity to reach out to Sephardic Jews and celebrate a linguistic brotherhood that was shared for over 500 years. And I guess the term here would be Hispanidad. So they have a common Spanishness that they share. And all of these movements together and the colonial project and this rise also in Spanish nationalism led to filosefardismo or philo-Sephardism to appear in scholarship. So you have the General Franco Institute that's established in 1938, the CSIC that's established in 1939. So in the eyes of Spaniards, Tetuan's cultural assets were representative of imperial Spanish Commonwealth that had recently disintegrated. So now, with that larger colonial context, we get into some of these emic representations, right? Self-perception of the Jews of Tetuan. And first we'll look at some regional nicknames and stereotypes common to these northern communities. And here I'm drawing upon the work, which I didn't mention on the slide, but there's great linguistic work conducted by Nina Pinto Abacasis, who was an Israeli language scholar, who was from the Tetuan community, but born and raised in Ashkelon. So she had a very insider perspective and was able to interview a lot of individuals, including Alicia Benassayag, and really understand on a subtle level a lot of linguistic phenomena that were taking place. So for instance, there were nicknames for Jewish individuals from different cities, such as El Chanjawi, people from Tangier, El Sheshauni, people from Chefchaouen, which is the blue city that we often see in Instagram. El Larachi, people from Larache. And each of these nicknames, they weren't simply names of people from a certain place. They also carried certain associative identities, not unlike most cities in the world. You know, if we're Americans, we have maybe perhaps certain stereotypes about people that come from different cities and a certain urban ethos that's attached to them. Tangier was, at the time of the Spanish protectorate and the French protectorate, an international zone. And it was a place where there was a lot more, I guess, interaction from people of different backgrounds. It was a much more open place culturally, whereas Tetuan was quite closed. And for that reason, it received a certain stereotype from the Tetuan Jews to be a bit dilettante. And the Sheshaunis were seen almost like the folk fool stereotype. They were a bit ignorant. They weren't as culturally sophisticated. And in addition, there is the term el forastero, which is the stranger. And so this was a term given to the Jews of Morocco who had existed in the area for thousands of years sometimes. So these are Jewish communities that were intermingled with Amazigh communities and spoke Judeo-Arabic, for instance, Judeo-Amazigh. And so there was a sort of social hierarchy that was taking place that's embedded in this language. And there are even other terms like el sachen, which sounds a lot like the Hebrew shachen, or neighbor, which was given to a Christian who married a Jewish woman without converting to Judaism. But at the same time, communities of Spanish Morocco saw the people of Tetuan as a cultural and religious elite, and stingy and closed off at the same time. So these perceptions go both ways, and you could probably do a deep dive into how various cities perceived one another. Now, here we have some oral history interviews that were conducted by Nina Pinto Abacasis of Alicia Benassayag. And I'll share a little bit of these with you. You could analyze one of these for 10 minutes. But this gets into a more maybe taboo territory where it's a bit like attending a stand-up comedy show, where we have some joke telling taking place, where the jokes are entering into the realm of things that are not acceptable in everyday life. And this was the center of Nina Pinto Abacasis' work, is to look into what is embedded in these types of jokes. And so here, even in this example, which is seis patas, there's a joke about, I guess, essentially, a man gets into bed with his wife in the evening, and then he says, there are 6 legs here. And then she curses at him using an Arabic word, melok. And then he says it again, she curses him again, and then someone replies and pretty much says, does my lord intend to keep quiet? Pretty much telling the guy to keep quiet. And then the answer from the man is, if it weren't for this lord, you'd call me a liar. So he's angry at his mom because he prefers to be right rather than worrying about his wife cheating on him. So it's poking fun at this Shawnee identity. And I think more important than laughing at the joke, because I think humor is quite subtle, I think there's a lot of interesting language phenomena that's embedded in these types of jokes. And I've highlighted some of them in bold. The melok, which is a derija term, a curse. Also the word mujer, which means woman in Spanish, is pronounced mujer, which is more common of a traditional Haketía. And also the word mentiroso, the Z replacing the S is also an influence of more Arabic or more traditional Haketía styles. And Alicia Benassayag, she also uses a little bit of Z to replace the S, but she exaggerates it almost in a kind of mimetic way to portray the Shawan as, through this stereotype that we talked about a little bit less culturally sophisticated. So I'll just play this, and you will see the moment that her identity switches as she's telling the story and mimicking this person from Shawan.
Habían muchas dijot de Sheshauni.
Muchas había, muchas. Había uno que se metieron en la cama, la mujer estaba en la cama y él se metió. Mujer, aquí hay 6 patas. Cállame la boca. Pasan 5 minutos. Mujer, te digo que aquí hay 6 patas. Cállame la boca. Entonces salió una voz y dice, ¿se va usted a callar esta noche o no? Si ves, si no fuera por este señor me sacaran mentiroso.
Now, Alicia Benassayag, she has quite subtle delivery when she tells jokes in general. I've seen this also from her performances of music. But even the fact that she's employing subtle hand gestures and maintaining eye contact with the screen displays a certain type of, she's taking on a character. So this, let me move forward a bit. I won't share the second one. But ultimately, these jokes reveal a sense of Tetuan's moral and cultural superiority over other Haketía-speaking Jewish populations from the region. And more importantly, I think what it reveals is anxieties about Spanish colonial perception of these populations, because this is a point in time when Haketía is being relegated further and further into the Jewish communities and is not spoken in public. And by the time that Alicia Benassayag has now moved to Israel, it's barely spoken. It's more of a nostalgic language at this point. So essentially, Morocco gains independence in 1956, and as was discussed in the previous presentation, there was a massive Jewish migration wave. This included migrating to Israel, to France, Latin America, the United States, Canada. In Israel in particular, where Benassayag relocated, Moroccans were viewed as second-class citizens under an Ashkenazi elite. And pressures toward homogenization under a new Israeli national culture that was burgeoning led to future generations not transmitting the Haketía lore, the music that Alicia Benassayag had carried with her during her life. And this also led to new notions of diaspora, such as Moroccanness, right? So you see how a community that at one time had distinguished itself from everyone else around it is now being grouped together with all Moroccans within an Israeli society. And furthermore, they're being grouped with all Sephardic Jews in cultural representations of folk songs. And here I'm taking a quote straight from Pinto Abukassis, where she is stating that not only did Tetuan's former inhabitants find it difficult to accept the Moroccan identity that was forced on them in Israel, but they were also not content with their sub-classification as Spanish Moroccans. They saw themselves as distinct from the Jews of neighboring cities in northern Morocco as well, and wished to emphasize their origin as Spanish-speaking Tetuanese. So we see a very unique sense of identity formation that is a case study of this community. Essentially, Jews of Tetuan perceive themselves as encapsulating a sonically expressed Castilian heritage, hearkening back to the Iberian Golden Age as part of their proud Jewish identity. This perception became increasingly entangled with national and colonial projects in the 20th century, generating additional identity dilemmas and interrupting the transmission of an insular lore. Thank you all very much.
This is great, thank you. Can you say a little something about the language of the songs? Like, to what extent is it distinctively Haketía versus Spanish, and in the contemporary North African Judeo-Spanish music scene, to what extent is there an overlap with the Ottoman Latino scene?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, language is interesting. I've been reading a couple studies that have talked about how song interrupts the diachronic evolution of language. Sometimes songs can carry older forms that may no longer exist in everyday speech. And I think that's certainly true with some certain case studies in I guess, Judeo-Spanish, Haketía, and Ladino. And regarding, I guess, the linguistic expression in what we might call Sephardic music, Ladino music, you know, it really depends on the artist as well. I mean, I can certainly see this even with the ensemble that I work with, the Canticas Muestras, where it's a group of Sephardic people from entirely different regions. There's one woman from Argentina whose family is traced back to Tetuan, and another from Istanbul, born and raised, and someone else whose mother was from Rhodes, another one from Greece. And each of them has a very different idea of what Judeo-Spanish sounds like. And sometimes we'll be singing a song and one will say, you know, and some of these people are 90 years old or so, they'll say, this is not Ladino. And so you'll get debates regarding how we should pronounce a word in a certain song. And so I think depending on an artist, you know, they might be drawing on a certain archival source that might shape how they decide to perform a song. And sometimes there's one word that will almost be a hook, that it will have some sort of, I guess, sonority or colloquialism that will be like, it's like you can't give that up. I've seen that in certain songs where we have to sing this one in a certain way. So yeah, I think that it's a complex question. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. It's all really new to me. So great introduction. Thank you. Could you speak a little bit more about the music? You told us about the ballad that Alicia Benassayag sings. Could you speak a little bit about the other musical genres, in particular, how the musical style or the performance practice differs from other kinds of Sephardic Jewish music or North Moroccan music, just sort of situate it for us?
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of these songs, as I said, they're traditionally sung unaccompanied. The wedding repertoire, these cantos de boda, they will often be performed with percussion of some sort, like a hand percussion, maybe a tambourine or hand drum. But it's not like the Andalusian music that we discussed or we saw in the last presentation, which has a whole ensemble. There's less instrumental accompaniment that goes with these songs traditionally, although there are arrangements made by commercial artists or by those reinterpreting the genre that can take all kinds of shapes. But I would say in the Eastern Mediterranean, say in Turkey, it's much more common to have many instruments accompanying these songs, the oud, more of an ensemble type performance. Yeah. Thank you.